and welcome to this pivotal session on occupational licensing for military spouses. I'm Dr. Lorraine Butler, your moderator for today's discussion, and I'm honored to have each of you here with us. Today, we have esteemed guests joining us from all over the country. We have Ms. Tammy Perot from the U.S. Department of Defense's State Liaison Office. Mr. Patrick Scotti, leading the Service Members and Veterans Initiative within the U.S. Department of Justice. Ms. Claire Gibson, representing the Military Spouse JD Network. And Ms. Carla Langham, Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Service. Thank you all for coming. Now, before we dive into our discussion, let's cover a few housekeeping rules. First, this webinar will be recorded and we will follow up with an email containing resources discussed today. So there is no need to be distracted trying to pull everything up. Closed captioning is available. Simply select it in the lower left corner, I believe. And then while audio and functions are disabled for attendees, please feel free to ask questions in the chat and we will do our best to respond if there is time. Okay, and now for the reason that we're all here. It's Military Spouse Appreciation Day. And as a current military spouse myself, supporting this discussion is deeply personal. But first, I wanted to share a little bit more about the Women's Bureau. We are an agency that was established over 103 years ago. We're an organization dedicated to championing policies and standards to safeguard the interests and rights of working women. Our mission extends to advocating for better and safer working conditions for women across all industries. Today, our mission remains steadfast as we work towards three critical goals. Next slide. First, we aim to foster greater inclusivity by increasing the representation of women and workers of color in pipelines to quality employment, particularly in non-traditional occupations. Second, we are committed to eliminating the wage and employment disparities linked to caregiving responsibilities, acknowledging that disproportionate impact that these responsibilities place on women within the workforce. And third, we are steadfast in our resolve to combat pay discrimination, gender-based discrimination, and to address gender-based violence and harassment within the world of work. Next slide. Protecting the roles of women in the workforce is of paramount importance to the Women's Bureau, and considering that about 92% of military spouses are women, we are an important group to pay attention to. Fortunately, people are. In fact, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is quoted saying, "Military spouse employment is a national security imperative." And I completely agree with that sentiment. Next slide. Here's a picture of me and my family. There's some cute kids in there. I love them a lot. First one is my first military ball. The second one, my husband's going on a deployment. You can see my daughter's sad. My son has no idea what's happening. And then that's the family. And of course, Semper Gumby is wonderful. So, I can't tell you how many times my husband and I used to entertain the idea of him getting out of the military. I say used to because we passed that 10-year mark a couple of years ago. So I'm sure many of you understand that like we can faintly see the light at the end of this tunnel. But that was not always the case. When I first met my husband, I was teaching at a school in Ohio. We were introduced by mutual friends who just said we would connect well. Now, for context, this man was living in Hawaii, and I was preparing. Yeah, he was living in Hawaii, and he was preparing for a 9-month deployment to the Philippines. So at the time, I thought I was just keeping a lonely Marine company while he was on the other side of the world. So think like support the troops kind of. However, at the end of his deployment, he came right to Ohio to meet me in person for the first time. And by then, life looked very different because I was now working as a vice principal and I was also very much in love. But again, I lived in Ohio. he lived in Hawaii, and there were no organic ways for us to be closer. So at the end of the school year, I decided to move to Hawaii, and I moved with a lot of confidence. I moved with confidence because I was great in my mind. I had degrees, licenses, and positive work experiences with plenty of strong references to back it up. Unfortunately, reality quickly set in, and I soon realized it wouldn't be as easy to transfer my educational licenses as I had hoped. Over time, and quite some months went by, but I became discouraged when I realized that even after the months it would take for me to obtain the new licenses and cost money that I didn't have, that I would have to do the same thing in a few years once we moved again. So we eventually realized that we wouldn't be able to excel in both of our fields. And in considering these factors, my husband was willing to get out of the military in order to give me a chance to pursue my goals. Ultimately, we decided that the best thing for our family, though, was for him to stay in. And consequently, I ended up leaving a field that I loved and had dedicated so much time, money, and passion towards pursuing. Next slide. But, as I mentioned earlier, transitioning careers as a military spouse is often a daunting task, especially when we're faced with the prospect of obtaining new licenses or certifications in a different state. In my case, as an educator with aspirations of advancing to a principal and district level position, the idea of starting over to obtain a new principal's license was just wasn't just challenging, but also financially and temporarily burdensome. Had there been provisions in place that would facilitate the portability of professional licenses for military spouses, such as reciprocity agreements between states, it would have provided a significant incentive for me to stay in the education field despite challenges of military life. As we all know, there's other barriers to employment. They exist, such as finding compatible job opportunities and navigating the job market in a new location. Having the assurance that my hard-earned credentials would be recognized and honored across state lines would have drastically helped. And unfortunately, my story isn't unique. I know so many military spouses who are well educated and highly qualified for a range of careers, but frequent moves makes it difficult to stay on a consistent career path. Next slide. Sorry. In fact, we have numbers to support. Research shows that military spouses are a versatile workforce, yet we face the highest unemployment rates in the country at around 22%. And for those who are employed, there is a 26% wage gap compared to our civilian counterparts. Occupational licensing regulations present another obstacle to employment. As much as 34% of military spouses work in a profession requiring licensing or certification, primarily in the health and education related fields. A 2019 DoD survey found that 1 in 5 military spouses who work in a licensed profession waited around 10 months or more to get their credential after a move. Additionally, and there's next slide. There's a recent study by Blue Star Families that revealed that the combined impact of unemployment, underemployment, and reduced labor force participation among military spouses cost the US economy nearly 1 billion annually. Moreover, the survey highlighted that lack of employment opportunities ranked as the most concerning life issue among military spouses. With military retirement or recruitment, I'm sorry, at an all-time low, and the challenges of military lifestyle posing a threat to national security, it is imperative to enhance the environment to bolster future recruitment and retention efforts. Now, I know these are disappointing statistics, but they do underscore the critical importance of today's session, where we will hear from esteemed leaders providing insight on the expanded portability of occupational licensing for military spouses. This initiative is pivotal in addressing a significant barrier to employment faced by military spouses. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Patrick Scotti, who will provide an introduction of who he is and the work being done under the Service Members and Veterans Initiative.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for sharing your story and for the introduction. Really appreciate getting to be here today and to talk a little bit about the new provision under the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act. But before I do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't put out a huge thank you to all the military spouses who are attending today. As an Army reservist, I know firsthand that our national security is built on the back of powerful sacrifices by our military families, from frequent moves to childcare challenges to barriers and difficulties with employment. We are in your debt, but today I'm asking you to be a little selfish and to hopefully use some of this information to benefit you on your next PCS as you try to move your license to near jurisdictions all across the country. The Service Members and Veterans Initiative at the Department of Justice is committed to ensuring that the rights of our nation's service members and their families are safeguarded, and that extends and includes the new right to license portability under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, or SCRA. So this new portability provision is a huge change in the law, right? Before, there was very much a state-by-state basis for portability for different professions. And now there is a federal right for the whole country to move your license, to use your license in a new state when you move. And so a powerful right here, and one to help combat the difficulties that military spouses face when not just trying to remain employed through a PCS, but like Lorraine talked a little bit about, remaining employed in your chosen field. I think there's something so powerful about that you have invested time, energy, financial resources, so many hours to become an expert in a field and to get a professional license, and have gone through arduous paperwork processes to get the one or potentially more. And hopefully this new provision will allow you to move your license and to be employed in your chosen field in new places. But we have to acknowledge that, this new right came about almost overnight, and licensing boards, the states, and many military spouses are still working through how to put this into action. So, as I said, we at the Department of Justice are committed to ensuring that every military spouse can take advantage of this. After President Biden signed this law into effect, our federal partners from the Department of Labor, from the Department of Defense, and us, we all went to work. We've put out a few resources on this, one of which we'll go through in a minute here. But the first is a fact sheet that kind of breaks down the requirements for portability, answers some frequently asked questions, and has some resources for military spouses. The second one was a letter. Thank you so much, Samantha. The second one was a letter for the licensing boards that was sent through the National Association of Attorneys General, specifically directed the licensing boards to put them on notice as to the new law and what it requires of those boards. We've also been working hand in hand with military legal assistance in every branch to try to help military spouses on the ground. So let's take a look at the fact sheet, and I'll draw your attention to the blue box on the right-hand side of the first page that walks through, and we'll walk through the requirements for portability. But before I do that, two important exceptions that two of my fantastic colleagues are going to come on to talk about after me. But first, very frustrating for me as a lawyer, law licenses are excluded. We'll talk more about that later in the presentation. So I won't belabor it. And second, interstate licensure compacts. My wonderful colleague from the from DSLO is going to talk more about these compacts, but essentially they are states entering into contracts to decide on a particular set of rules for a profession. If you have a license that is subject to an interstate compact, and you are moving to a state that is subject to the same compact, the compact rules are what is going to apply to you, and not the SCRA license portability. But in all other cases, the SCRA license portability will apply. So if you're moving from a compact state, compact license to a non-compact state, SCRA license portability applies. If you are moving from a non-compact state to a compact state, SCRA license portability still applies. All right, so let's talk through these 5 requirements here listed on the fact sheet for portability. I'll refer to an example. I'm from New York. My wife was a teacher in New York. For this, I now live in Virginia, so we'll pretend that I went from the Reserve Center in Fort Totten, Queens to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and kind of use that as an example to talk through some of these. So number 1, you have to have moved to a location outside the jurisdiction of the licensing authority that issued the covered license because of orders for military service. So in this case, my wife's a teacher. She has New York education licenses. We are moving because of my military orders from New York to Virginia, and she wants to work in Virginia and move for a license in Virginia. Okay, box check there. Number 2, provide a copy of the military orders to the licensing authority in the new jurisdiction. You're going to be putting together a package of materials for the new licensing authority. Now, these 5 requirements have the minimum, but don't feel like this is all you need to provide to the licensing authority if you want to provide more. A very common thing that many military legal assistance attorneys are adding to these packages when they work with military spouses is our letter to the state licensing authorities. Feel free to include that to make sure that the licensing boards are on notice as to this new provision and what they're supposed to be doing for you. All right. So we've attached my set of orders from New York to Virginia. Moving on to number 3, have actively used the license or certificate during the 2 years immediately preceding the move. I'm going to talk about the first court case in the nation that specifically dealt with this issue right after we finish going through the next 2. So I'll touch back on this in a second. Number 4, remain in good standing with the licensing authority that issued the covered license or certificate. Okay, so my wife has New York licenses. She has to do everything to maintain those licenses that is required in New York, whether it's paying fees, continuing legal education, any other requirements required by New York so that she can remain in good standing. She's going to still have to do even while she's in Virginia working. And then similarly, every other licensing authority that issued a license or certificate valid for a similar scope of practice and discipline applied for in the new jurisdiction. That's a lot of legalese for if my wife also had licenses in New Jersey that she was maintaining, she would have to continue being in good standing there and maintaining those licenses. Number 5, submit to the authority of the licensing authority in the new jurisdiction for the purposes of, and there are 3 areas here. The first being standards of practice. So in a number of fields, it very state dependent what you are allowed to do under your license, especially in the medical field, different state to state, right? So this will require some research, some discussions with the licensing authority about what you were able to do in your original state and what you're able to do in your new state. And that is going to be highly dependent on how your new jurisdiction handles giving you a license. If your license is being deemed valid, your old license is being deemed valid in the new state, you're really you're going to be under that similar scope of practice you were in the previous state. So my wife would be restricted to what she did in New York, and if things in New York were more expansive than they are in Virginia, she may be restricted to just the Virginia scope of practice. All something that you'll have to kind of work through with the licensing authority. All right, next one, submit for disciplinary purposes. So in the new jurisdiction, you're agreeing to be subject to their disciplinary proceedings, to if complaints processes, everything that they do in that state. And then finally, continuing education. If they require continuing education in that field, such as 5 hours of education courses for my wife, she would have to do those continuing legal education courses in her new state, in her new jurisdiction, to satisfy this requirement. So jumping back to the actively used in the prior 2 years part, last summer, the Justice Department issued a statement of interest in Portee v. Morath, a lawsuit from a military spouse, Ms. Portee, in Texas, alleging that Texas had denied her request for SCRA license portability. She had school counseling licenses in Ohio and Missouri and moved to Del Rio, Texas because of her husband's military orders. She had alleged that the Texas authorities told her the new SCRA law doesn't apply. Our statement of interest discussed, obviously pushed back on that, discussed the significant public interest in reducing barriers to licensure, increasing career opportunities for military spouses, but critically talked about this active use during 2 years requirement. And we argued that for military spouses, it'd be functionally impossible given the tempo of PCSs. If you're moving every 2 to 3 years or less, how can you work for 2 years in a specific field for an entire 2 years? We said it should be at some point in those 2 years, you have worked and used your license in that field. And the judge agreed with this point, and Ms. Porti won. Her licenses were deemed valid in Texas, a huge win for her and her family. But for the rest of us to know that this 2-year requirement means that you have to have used your license at some point in those 2 years. I'll ask my Samantha if you could share some of our links in the chat real quick. But on our fact sheet and our website, we've got some frequently asked questions about SCRA license portability, some resources really quick to highlight. We have links to military legal assistance. The military legal assistance attorneys are fantastic. They are working and advocating on behalf of military spouses all across the country to help them put together these packages of materials and talk to the licensing boards about getting portability. They are a wonderful resource. I highly encourage you to reach out to them, to your local legal assistance office as you put together your materials. If there are any questions about contacting a licensing authority, Career One Stop, a fantastic Department of Labor resource, that sponsored website that has information on state licensing requirements, interstate compacts, and very importantly, the contact information for most, if not all, licensing authorities across the country. And finally, you'll find links to our complaint portal for the Department of Justice. If you're not able to resolve the matter, you're running into issues, military legal assistance wasn't able to help you, please submit your information to the Department of Justice for consideration for an enforcement action. I really hope that this information and the information we have on our website is around the new SCRA license portability provision can help you as you move across the country. Thank you so much for all that you do for our nation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for explaining how all of this works, Patrick. And I also appreciate you just providing practical examples because it can get very confusing at times. Again, for everyone, the fact sheet and the resources presented will be shared at the conclusion of the event in a resource guide. So there's no need to get nervous if you weren't able to capture everything. And now it is time to highlight how the Military Spouse JD Network is contributing to this effort as well. And with that, I would like to have Ms. Claire Gibson introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Gibson. I'm president of the Military Spouse JD Network and Foundation, which is a bar association for military spouse attorneys. I'd like to have the slides popped up if we can do that, Samantha.
Just one moment, sorry.
No problem. In the meantime, a bit more about myself. My husband has been active duty military with the Marine Corps for over 21 years. We have been married for 13 years. And during that time, we have moved 5 times. So if you can do the quick math there, that's an average of a move every 2.5 years. For those of you who aren't attorneys, licensing rules for attorneys are extremely strict, in large part because of state laws specification issues. I often like to say that attorneys and service members are actually oil and water careers. They simply do not mix well. It is unheard of outside of the military spouse attorney community for an attorney to relocate states every 2 years. Most attorneys will stay in a single state for the majority of their career, specifically because of the nature of our licensing rules. And so when you speak to many military spouse attorneys like myself, who are moving on an average of 2.5 years, you can understand the difficulties that people in our profession face. Next slide, please. So let's look at those numbers. 94% of our members are women. These stats come from our most recent survey, which was conducted last year. 12% of our members report being unemployed. Again, that doesn't account for people who have given up on looking for a career simply because of how daunting it can be. 82% of our members report being negatively impacted by military life. The majority of our members earn below the national average for attorneys. 50% live apart from their spouses at some point in order to have a semblance of a career, myself included. My husband and I are on our second set of geobaching experiences. Right now, he's in Hawaii and I'm in New York. Previously, we have done Okinawa, Japan, and California apart. Neither of those situations is ideal for maintaining a marriage, as you can take into consideration the time zone and distance and difference. 50% of our members have student loan debt over $100,000. As you can understand, of course, if you're not familiar, law school degrees are not cheap. And likewise, the majority of our members live with household incomes below $100,000. So that's just to give you a scope of understanding of who our members are and the types of statistics that we're looking at. Next slide, please. That said, MSJDN has a legacy of 13 years of advocacy for military spouse licensing. This organization was founded in 2011 by two military spouse attorneys who were frustrated by, again, what I like to call the oil and water situation of being an attorney married to a service member. MSJDN has advocated for licensing accommodations for military spouses and on a state-to-state basis during those 13 years. Our goal is to have military spouses be admitted to the state where they have been transferred by orders without having to take an additional bar exam. Again, for those of us in the audience who aren't attorneys, the bar exam cycle is literally a multi-year long cycle. From the time you decide to take a bar exam, the preparation for the exam, waiting for the results, then to be evaluated by character and fitness, then to be admitted is generally over a year-long process. So as you can imagine, between the time an attorney may receive orders to a new state to begin even attempting to get licensed in that state, it will be a year to a year and a half before they can even have a license in that state to start working. MSJDN has been among military family organizations a leader in advocacy for licensing long before this issue was being discussed in other places, if I may give us that degree of credit. Next slide, please. So here's where we started. In 2012, with the support of the ABA Commission the American Bar Association, Commission on Women in the Profession, the ABA House of Delegates adopted a resolution supporting changes to state licensing rules for military spouses with law degrees. So from that point, the dominoes kind of started to fall, fortunately. In April 2012, Idaho was the first state to have a military spouse admissions rule. Then from there, December 2012, Arizona issued a rule as well, followed in 2013 by Texas, and then April 2013 as well, North Carolina. Next slide, please. And so here's where we are today. As mentioned by my earlier colleague, attorneys have been excluded from the SCRA licensing portability rules. The reason that I have been told for that is what I mentioned earlier with regard to attorneys working specifically with state law, and there being concerns about having a blanket rule that allows us to move from state to state and continue our careers. We are the only licensed profession that have been explicitly excluded from that rule. Nonetheless, at MSJDN, we continue to do what we've been doing for the last 13 years. And today, 44 states and the US Virgin Islands have licensing rules. On our website, which will be provided in the chat, you can access guidelines for license waivers in each of those states. Each state has its own specific requirements, and so you'll have to go through and check the boxes for each of those. Now, what I will say is that some states have what we deem to be overly burdensome requirements. In particular, some states have supervision requirements. I myself have been practicing for close to 15 years. For me to stay in Hawaii and practice and have a license in Hawaii would have required me to be supervised, even, for example, by an attorney who only had 1 year of experience. Those state rules are also outlined, and we're working to have those states revise their rules so that they are less burdensome for our members. In addition to that, as you can see, there are 6 states with no rules at all with regard to licensing for military spouse attorneys, and that includes Wisconsin, Maine, Minnesota, Montana, Vermont, and Mississippi. We are diligent being attorneys and continuing to do the work that we need to do to have licensing rules implemented in those states, as well as having revisions made to the states with the overly burdensome rules. Next slide, please. Our goals and our objectives are what they always have been. Again, we were on this topic and addressing this issue before it became an issue of national concern. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Jill Biden for the attention that she has brought to this issue and addressing the fact that it is a national security concern. It is no longer a point where military spouses are choosing to just be supportive members of the military community. We can do that and maintain careers. The end result is that service members are faced with decisions about whether they want to stay in the service, whether they can afford to stay in the service, when they're in households with professions and professionals who have degrees that also need to be paid for and who have the right to pursue their career interests. And so at MSJDN, our goal is to continue to advocate for licensing rules in the remaining states. We are also continuing to advocate for inclusion in the SRCA licensing portability rules, and we're continuing to build relationships with hiring partners to address other barriers to employment for our members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. And I just appreciate you sharing your story as a fellow Marine Corps spouse. Anyone who can go over the 20 years is amazing to me.
He's
And
crazy.
I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to get to 20. And then I'm like, my turn.
Yeah, I thought that too. No, he's been doing this since high school. We're New Yorkers, and we were seniors in high school when 9/11 happened, and my husband ran right off after graduation and joined the military at a time where, you know, many people weren't. And so combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and this is what he does.
That's amazing. I'm going to also use the oil and water professions in describing these careers moving forward. So thank you again for sharing. And now I would love to pivot and hear from Department of Defense, the Defense-State Liaison Office, Ms. Tammy Perot.
Lorraine, thank you so much. And Claire and Patrick, what a wonderful background for all of the work that is being done here to support military spouses. My name's Tammy Perot, and I work for an office called the Defense State Liaison Office. We're part of DoD's effort to improve quality of life for our military families. And we work specifically with state legislatures to do that work, to improve military family quality of life. We're an initiative that's been around for over 15 years. And today I'm going to talk about occupational licensure compacts. This is one of the things that I really love is working on the project of occupational licensure compacts. I serve as the project lead and the SME on this. And it's near and dear to my heart as well because I am also a military spouse. I serve as the Northwest Region Liaison, and I'm located at Joint Base Lewis McChord with my active duty service member spouse and my family out in Washington State. So let's get right into it by looking at the next slide. We've seen some of these numbers before, but I think it's really important for us to pin down that in our active duty spouse survey, that's the official survey that the DoD does of our active duty spouses, we really identified in 2021 that 21% unemployment rate, 36% of our military spouses requiring an occupational license for employment. And what's really key here is of our unemployed spouses, they are more likely to be the spouses that need an occupational license. So if you say it another way, if you are a spouse that needs an occupational license to work, you are more likely to be unemployed. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about what is an occupational licensure interstate compact. And Patrick gave us a little overview that this is a state-to-state agreement between two or more states. These agreements have been around since the 1780s, and states have been using them to work out issues around natural resources. How do we use a river? They've been using them to work out issues around emergency management response. States have been using them in a wide variety of ways, and there's over 290 compacts that states belong to. Our office has a long experience with compacts because we worked on using a compact to improve the quality of education for military children. When we saw that success, we realized there was also this other opportunity, and that was to work on occupational licensure interstate compacts to help resolve the challenge of licensure mobility and licensure moving across those state lines for our military spouses. Compacts are an elegant and enduring solution. They provide clear and consistent rules and processes. And if you're wondering, what's a compact I might already be familiar with or I might be using regularly, just look at your driver's license. The National Driver's License Compact allows us to move across state lines, being licensed as a driver in just one state and still being able to drive in the other 49 states. So that is really the essence of how a compact works. We've really focused on facilitating compacts by working with state legislatures to help them understand how military spouses benefit from occupational licensure compacts, how it reduces those burdens and barriers of extra paperwork, having to submit for new licensure, and ensures public safety by preserving state authority over professional licensing. All of the compacts we work on have specific provisions for military spouses so that they aren't having to regularly change their home state. There's 4 main compact types. The multi-state licensure compact, where you have a license in one state and you can use it in all the other states that have adopted the compact. Privilege to practice, where you have a license in one state and you simply apply for a privilege, usually issued in 24 hours, to work in another state. Temporary and telehealth license compacts, those provide support for folks that maybe need to surge to a certain area to provide temporary services and to provide telehealth alone services. And licensure exchange, that's the model of a compact that I think would have helped Lorraine, and that's the teaching compact. That compact allows you to come to a state with a license and get a good handoff, a good clean handoff from one teaching license to another without any barriers. On the next slide, you'll see a list of all the occupational licensing compacts that are out there. In the yellow, you're going to see the list of compacts that have been developed specifically by the professions without any support of the Department of Defense Cooperative Agreement, which I'm going to get into in just a second. Those compacts that have those high numbers, 41, and I believe we're at 42 as of this week with the Nurse Licensure Compact. A new state just joined, I believe it was day before yesterday. Those occupational licensure compacts are up, they're running, and they're functional. One thing I often hear from military spouses is they say, hey, my state just passed a compact. The governor signed this new law. We're part of the compact now. Can I get my state license through the compact? Oftentimes it takes a little bit more than that before the compact becomes fully functional. A specific threshold of a number of states need to belong to the compact. So you can see we're not quite there yet with school psychologists or dietitians. We're getting closer with cosmetologists. And then once all those states pass the compact, they come together. The state agencies come together and work together to establish a database, the rules, and the processes of how that compact's going to work. Oftentimes, this may take 12 to 24 months. And folks may be saying, geez, this feels like a long time to get these compacts done. But once they're in place, they're an enduring solution. These compacts provide stability for licensure of that profession for years and decades to come. And we've seen that with many of the compacts that are over on the yellow side of this slide. We've seen it with nurses. We've seen it with EMS. We've seen it with psychology. In the middle, you see a group of compacts that are in blue. These are compacts that have been supported through a cooperative agreement between the Department of Defense and the Council of State Governments National Center for Interstate Compacts. We've invested in these compacts to help military spouses improve their licensure reciprocity. These compacts are new, they're developing, they're being adopted by the states. And when they get up and running, they have specific provisions for military spouses in these professions to maintain parity with their peers and to be able to transfer their license easily. Over in the green are two other professions that are under development right now, respiratory therapists and athletic trainers. We're going to see those compacts here in the next 12 to 24 months, and those are also going to benefit military spouses. On the next slide, I'll briefly talk about the DoD CSG Cooperative Agreement. Folks often ask about this and about this cooperative agreement on the next slide. It really talks about how in fiscal year 2020 NDAA, Congress said to us, we need to go ahead and do this work around compacts. These are an enduring solution. This provides occupation-specific answers for military spouses and for all members of that occupation. We're going to set aside some money to work with the Council of State Governments to support those occupations that we have a large number of military spouses in, to develop that compact language that can be adopted by the states. So through this program, we are in the process of launching and creating 10 professional occupational licensure compacts. This really shows DoD's commitment to ensuring we have an elegant, long-lasting solution for military spouses. We want military spouses to know we're committed to this work and we're committed to making this work for our spouses. And on the last slide is some information on how you can contact me as your fellow military spouse and as a regional liaison, and how you can contact our office. We're always here to work with the states and help put you in touch with the right folks to answer your questions. Thank you so much for this time. What an honor to be on this amazing panel on this very special day to me and all military spouses.
Thank you so much, Tammy. And I appreciate you just sharing how these compacts work. You are absolutely right. Having compacts would have been amazing when I was teaching, but I am incredibly grateful for the growing solutions and the commitment from DoD. And now, last but certainly not least, Ms. Carla Langham, who is the Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Labor's Veterans Employment and Training Service, known as VETS. I had the privilege of meeting Ms. Carla, 2 weeks ago, who is an incredible game changer. So I'm excited to have her close out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lorraine. This is amazing. I just want, first and foremost, want to thank Women's Bureau for all the amazing work that you do. There is actually a research paper that you all put out. It was an update to a previous one called "The Cost of Doing Nothing," and it really explores the cost to the government or just to the American public economically when we don't put women to work. And then you said that stat earlier about, there's a $1 billion economic loss to those, think about where those bases are and where that money could be going. And I really feel like that those are the terms we need to talk about the military spouse unemployment being at 21% for so long. I, in my position, definitely explore with the assistant secretary how we can change things. Ongoing conversations again with our counterparts at DoD, at VA as well. DOJ, huge champions over here. We love bouncing things off of them and really getting the word out as much as possible. I don't think you guys know this, but the SERA team at DOJ, it's a 2-person team. So any kind of help you can throw their way, I always want to bring them anywhere because they're really doing the great work. And so I, also just want to reiterate that this is it's been said a few times, military spouse unemployment rate, it's a gender issue, right? 92% of military spouses are women, and President Biden's initiatives to get women back to work and his work around military spouses is super, super helpful. So I'm Carla Langham. I am the Chief of Staff here at VETS. I am a retired military spouse, and I put that in quotes. My husband's like, I don't think you're ever going to slow down, and I think he's ready for the rocking chair. He retired after 21 years from the Navy. I moved, just like all of you, 12 times in 13 years. I have certification du jour, right? So this certificate's gonna solve all my problems, and it'll be a portable one, and it'll work. And of course, that generally didn't happen. But what I have learned throughout my time here, before I get into everything DOL and VETS does, is that as an underrepresented group, and anyone who is a part of an underrepresented group, especially being female, we know that we have to conduct ourselves in a certain way to dispel any kind of stigma surrounding that. So hiring military spouses, obviously, if you ask me, is a good choice, but we have to advocate and educate at every turn, and then act in such a way that we leave the best impressions so that we can hand that off to the next military spouse that they're going to hire. And so I can't say that enough. These one-pagers, the information that you're getting today from DOJ, because you are a part of this underrepresented group and you make up a very small fraction of the population, you will have to walk in hand with that one-pager and basically say, I will call DOJ. And they will come help you. So you do have like the full force of the federal government that's going to help you with your licensing issues, except for attorneys. And I think that's awful. And I am so sorry. So happy Military Spouse Appreciation Day. I really am sad that this falls on Mother's Day weekend. I feel like that's a little bit of a scam. And also, you got to separate those brunches because there's definitely 2 of those. And it falls within PCS season. Also a little unfair, but sure. So Department of Labor, what we do here, I like to say Department of Labor wraps their arms around the entire workforce, the entire American workforce, which includes military spouses. And so we're often thought of just compliance. Everyone knows OSHA, like the bummer agency, but what we really do here is workforce development across the country. We're located in 2,250 American job centers. And what we provide there is supposed to be a one-stop shop. So we provide a grant, the state runs it. It's really a community-based brand organization. So your state workforce agencies are made up of about 51% businesses. The rest are nonprofits, religious institutions, faith-based institutions. Just think of whatever community-based organizations, and they make decisions on where those dollars go that we send to that community. I always say get involved so you can fight for those equities for military spouses. This administration, the Biden administration, has really invested a lot of dollars in infrastructure and a lot of contracts that are going out. Military spouses have been listed in an executive order as an underrepresented group. So you can go in there and say, hey, we want to make sure that we are being represented in federal contracting. So I covered AJCs, and why that's so important is that I didn't know this until I started working here. Military spouses are considered a dislocated worker, displaced homemaker. So when you move, you can walk into your American Job Center and they will connect you with different benefits that pertain to you. Part of that is upskilling and reskilling dollars. So if you're considered that dislocated worker, there are dollars for you to get upskilled, reskilled for jobs that are being hired in that area. Those dollars go as far as childcare, clothes, like interview clothes. I've heard of them also floating people either by rent or keeping the lights on. What we want to do is set up that worker, wrap our arms around them until they are on their feet and ready to go on their own. Not a lot of people know that we're often thought of as the unemployment office instead of just the employment office, right? So we're really trying to get the word out, especially with about 8.8 million jobs expected to be open across the United States. And I believe it's like a 10% cliff coming in high school graduation. So we're gonna need to hire people from somewhere. If you ask me, this is the best pool that you can come from and get to. And we also learned during COVID, these jobs can be remote, right? We can accommodate and work with one another. So when you walk into an AJC, you're going to get resource rooms with phones, free internet, employment plan development, job training services, job search assistance, career counseling, practice interviewing, skills testing, labor market information, and then they'll connect you to different hiring events as well. Again, you can set foot in there. I know we talked a little bit about the Blue Star families research that has been done. When you walk into an AJC, they will also assess you to see if you can sign up for SNAP benefits, and they can sign you up there and kind of white glove that for you and help you out. So we know that I think 25% of families are reporting being food insecure. And I believe I read somewhere recently, only 12% of military families are taking advantage of SNAP benefits and those social resources. So what does DOL Vets do? So we work a lot with veterans here to make sure that they get into the workforce and those equities are being shared. We also give out grants, homeless veteran reentry program grants, those veterans who have been justice involved. We also wrap our arms around them, give money to grantees to make sure that we help them get into the workforce. But what we do for military spouses, we have an online platform. It's called the Transition Employment Assistance Program for Military Spouses, TEAMS. And so through that, there are different modules you can take for resume writing, interviewing, LinkedIn skills, all these other items that you have in there, how to connect to your American Job Centers and where to find them. And also sidebar, American Job Centers is just what we call them at the federal level. Each state has different names for them. So if you go to our website, DOL website, you can look up your American Job Center. We also have a link called Career One Stop. So when you're moving, you can start looking for jobs ahead of time. So Career One Stop will help you with that. And in addition to that, we also have the National Labor Exchange. So National Labor Exchange, in connection with the state workforce agencies across the country, you can look them up by state. You can also look up jobs based on military spouse, right? Military spouse ready and friendly companies that want to hire you. And of course, we can also break it down by veterans and other options. I think like Student Veterans of Americas also has a platform on it. We were asked to partner or to pilot a couple of programs, Employment Navigator Partner Pilot Program. I believe we're coming out of the pilot stage and we're trying to scale it more so on more bases. We are unfortunately on limited bases. I want to say we're in about 20 to 30 bases across the country. So Employment Navigator, you walk into the TAP office, see if you have that program online. You can look it up on our website and get the information and reach out. So what that means is you get one-on-one wraparound services. And then on the partner side of that, we have about 60 partners across the country. So let's say you're moving from Korea to San Diego, you can meet with one of our employment navigators and they can start connecting you to resources in your local community that you're going to. So go to San Diego, we'll connect you with the American Job Center there. 0800 is one of our partners. They can also help you get on your feet, find jobs, and then Hire Heroes USA, that's another one of ours. We know that there's a sea of nonprofits out there, and navigating that in itself is daunting. So an employment navigator will help you find what you need, what your needs are, and then just connect you to those programs that can help set you up for success. We also very much encourage military spouses to participate in TAP. If you are getting close, if your family's getting close to transitioning completely out of the military, the TAP conversation will come up more. We encourage spouses just to take advantage of it whenever. That way you're prepared to know what's happening ahead of time when the transition comes your way. But also there's more employment information that our contractors give out to those classes that we encourage you to go to. It's a 5-day course. One is on VA, one is dedicated to DoD and getting out of the military. The third day is dedicated to labor, and the other two are optional. I believe it's career exploration, and oh goodness, the other one is small business administration, also gives briefs out as well. And then lastly, I just want to bring up the registered apprenticeship program. We have a website, and through registered apprenticeship, it's an earn while you learn opportunity for you, right? So there are different companies that use our intermediaries to kind of get you onboarded. There are a ton of jobs in cyber right now. If that's something you're interested in doing. We have cyber apprenticeships, you name it. We have them listed on the website. And it's an opportunity, again, to earn while you learn and get on your feet and make it to, out of a apprenticeship and into a journeyman situation. So I encourage you just to go to our website, and at the very least, please just step into your American Job Center to start gathering some of that information. I'm always a resource. You can find me on LinkedIn or reach out to me. I'm always available to answer any of your questions. Thank you so much, Lorraine. It was so good to see you.
It's great to see you too. Thank you so much for even just explaining all of the opportunities available through the DOL. Again, for everyone, please don't get nervous about all of the links that we are throwing in the chat. They will be provided to everyone who registered. Now we have a few questions in the chat, and I will turn it over to my colleague at the Women's Bureau, Samantha, to highlight.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, and thank you again to all of our panelists for all of the extremely helpful information that you've shared today. And to add to the link exhaustion, I am going to just throw in a couple more links from Pat at the Department of Justice. There were some that I wasn't able to share earlier, so those are coming your way as well. But yes, we do have a couple questions, and I think that some of these might have been addressed already a bit in the presentations, but I just want to make sure that we get an answer out to them. So, and this is for any of the panelists who feel like maybe you're best positioned to address that, please feel free to come back on and respond. So the first question is just, is there a contact for state licensing agencies, commissions, boards to contact directly with questions? And I'm guessing that's probably about like these provisions, for the new provision for the most part.
Yeah. So I messaged a few people about this in the chat, but just so everyone, if we have any state employees on the line, and you're looking for legal advice on how state law interacts with this new federal law, I'll just let you know and I'm sure Claire and MSJDN know this well. The first question you ask when you're a lawyer is, who's my client? Because it's who I give legal advice to. And for state employees, that is your state attorney's general office. So we have been in touch with the National Association of Attorneys General about this new federal law. They have distributed information to all the state attorneys general who are ready and equipped to provide legal advice to the licensing boards and state employees as they work to implement the new SCRA provisions.
Thank you, Pat. All right, and then our final question before we wrap up says, do licensing commissions, boards, agencies have the ability to determine substantial equivalency for requirements to obtain a license in their authorizing state as a way to deny utilization of the federal legislation outlining licensure portability for military spouses? And that was kind of lengthy, so feel free to have me repeat if anyone needs that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat it? I apologize.
Yes. So do the licensing, like the state licensing boards, have the ability to determine substantial equivalency for requirements to obtain the license in their state as a way to deny utilization of the new provision.
If the spouse meets the 5 requirements that we've talked about today, then their license should be deemed valid in the new state. As far as scopes of practice and the discipline applied for, that's more of an ongoing conversation as to what the person is able to practice in. And that is very dependent on the particulars of both the original license and the state that the person is moving to. So I don't have any particulars that I can share on that portion.
Okay, thank you, Pat. And I can go ahead and follow up with that individual and just make sure that we got things addressed for them. We are at the top of the hour though, so we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you again to all of our panelists for all that you've shared. Thank you to those who have attended. Thank you especially to all of our military spouses for all the sacrifices that you make. We will be sharing the information from this webinar afterwards, so be on the lookout for that. And happy Military Spouse Appreciation Day, everyone.